we got a lot of decisions to make in 3.4 Genshin. And honestly, we need to talk about it. Let's see who's best to choose when it comes to all the banners coming our way. What's going on, YouTube? It's Ledger here once again. This time at you again with some more Genshin Impact. A lot of you have seen the 3.4 live stream that happened last weekend, this past weekend, and you know, we've learned that we have a lot of decisions to make. I mean, we have some exciting stuff coming our way. We have new area, we have some cool events and so on and so forth. And the people who do like TCG, you know, you got some updates coming for that too. So yeah, so some things are coming our way. But one thing that a lot of people are thinking about is who should you summon for? All the characters coming, who's going to be the best? What's going to be the better decision? So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and break that down for you as best as I can, talking about different pros and cons of the different characters coming our way, especially when it comes to the rerun characters. So yeah, because actually, if you guys haven't seen my last video, I actually touched on Alhaitham quite a bit. So if you want to know more in detail what I think about Alhaitham, his pros mainly, and if he has any cons, things like that, then you know, I touch on that in a lot of detail in that last video, so definitely go check that out. But just to briefly touch on Alhaitham, I do think that he's going to be a great unit. He's a flexible, I do believe he's going to be a flexible DPS, right? So he's not going to be a bad pick in terms of that, right? I mean, is he going to be able to hit as hard as someone like Hu Tao? You know, is it going to be thrown in many teams as somebody like Yelan can? You know, so on and so forth. Is he going to be as much of an AOE force as Zhao can? You know, maybe each character has their own strengths, of course. But I do think Alhaitham is going to be a top-notch DPS. So if you like Alhaitham, you know, you can't really go wrong. But let's talk about some of the other characters, right? Let's talk about Zhao, right? Zhao is a character that's been around for quite some time, right? He's one of the OG characters. Essentially, he was in the beta of the entire game, so he's been around, right? And he has actually stuck with the rest of the cast in terms of power level, right? People have said certain things about him, you know, they've doubted him, so on and so forth. But most recently, he has essentially got an indirect buff in the form of Faruzan, who is going to take animal resistance, where he had a very limited source of that, and going to give him damage bonuses. So Zhao is hitting as harder than he ever has. Another thing that I recently just mentioned is the fact that I think one of Zhao's biggest strengths is his AOE capabilities, right? If you know his play style, he goes up and plunges, and he hits a lot of enemies within that area, right? So if you're facing multiple enemies, he can get rid of a lot of them at the same time, which is great. That's a great thing to have. Also, too, he's Anemo, so his element is pretty neutral in most situations. So you're not really worrying about different enemy resistances too much in terms of shields. As long as there's other elements around, he can be good at taking down shields. That's another good thing, you know. So essentially, he's a pretty neutral unit in terms of that sense, right? So that's another advantage. That's something that I do consider an advantage for him. But I mean, the thing is though, people have talked about him in a negative light because he does have some downsides. One of the downsides being is that against certain enemies, he's kind of undesirable, right? So when you're facing certain enemies that can get staggered and pushed back, he can separate enemies, like if you're saying Geo Vishaps, things like that. Enemies that you don't want moving around too much, he doesn't do good in those situations, right? In terms of that, you know, or single target, you know, he just isn't going to perform as well in a single target as a lot of other units are going to do, like Hu Tao and so on and so forth, because of that, you know. I mean, granted, you can buff up his damage by making sure you plunge on top of whatever enemy you're fighting to get that extra damage, extra plunge damage. But the fact of the matter is, in terms of single target, he does fall behind the other characters, right? So if you're somebody who's really struggling fighting bosses or so on and so forth, those big DPS checks for single targets, if that's where you're really struggling, then Zhao might not be the answer to your praise in terms of that, unless you just don't have a lot of damage, right? But as for me, I'm somebody who actually, I don't have Zhao. All the times that he's come, all the reruns that he's had, I have skipped every single time Not because I don't like the character, not because I think he has too many cons. Mainly it is just preference, because I do not like his playstyle. The constant up and down, up and down. It's just not fun for me. I don't like it. That's the thing. That's another thing to take into account too. Just really take into account their playstyles. Hu Tao is my favorite character. I'll get more into her in a little bit. Hu Tao is my favorite character because I love her playstyle. But do you like her playstyle? So that's one thing to always take into account. How you play with them and in terms of that, right? Now, but let's get into Hu Tao, right? Hu Tao, I might do her some justice, because Hu Tao is almost the opposite of Zhao in a sense where she's my favorite character. Like, when she came, I was most excited I was for any character whatsoever, right? And I love her for many reasons, and she does have a lot of pros. The thing with Hu Tao is, she is the strongest pyro DPS in the game, right? Is that my opinion? No, that is fact. She is the strongest, all right? Mommy, of course, is my opinion, of course. If you build Yoimiya well enough, she can overpower Hu Tao. But I'd say all things equal, Hu Tao is going to hit harder. That's how it is right there, right? She hits extremely hard. She has some pretty good teams, some vape comps. You can even try and do some melt comps with her, things like that. With Rosaria or support Ganyu, so on and so forth. So she can be somewhat flexible in teams, and she is a primarily single target. But if you play with her smart, she can actually perform very well in AOE situations. So that's the thing when it comes to that. So she's not like stuck to single target. That might be a misconception that some people have, that when in terms of groups that she can't perform. Yes, she can actually, especially if you pair her with someone like Kazuo or something like that, that she can do really well in those type of situations. On the opposite of Zhao, like how I said, if you're dealing with those big DPS checks with bosses that have lots of HP and so on and so forth, Hu Tao will melt them down, no pun intended, will melt those guys down in no time flat, right? So she's good for those type of situations, right? She might not be as good as Zhao in terms of AoE, but in those situations, and the Abyss is trying to do a DPS check, then she's the one that's going to be able to take that down no matter what, right? As long as you build her fairly well. The thing about her too is that in terms of constellations, right? She has decent constellations, but her C1 is really the bread and butter. So getting her C1 is definitely, I consider it a plus, because you can play with her without her C1. That's another misconception with her, that people think that you need her C1 for her to work well. All you have to do is dash cancel or throw in a couple normal attacks in order to counterbalance that. But the fact of the matter is, she does get a very good ease of use, a very good quality of life upgrade with her C1 that basically makes it so her charge attacks don't take stamina. So she, in a sense, peaks very early on in terms of constellations, right? So let's say if you have a C0 Hu Tao getting C1 Hu Tao is going to be really beneficial for you. So if you really like the character, maybe you might prioritize that over getting just a whole new DPS character altogether. You can't really go wrong with that. So that's the thing with that, right? So early on in his constellations, that she does peak, and that I do consider that a definite plus. But C1 I don't think is completely necessary. If you don't feel you can afford C1, then don't worry about it. You can still play with her by jump canceling or just adding in some normal attacks to the combos and such, right? That's the thing when it comes to that, right? So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Even if you do have C1, you got to jump cancel every once in a while, because one little thing that a lot of people don't know about Hu Tao, a little fun fact for you guys, when you charge attack when you're dash canceling, after about 3 dash cancels, she just won't dash. For some reason there's like a limit to how many times you can dash cancel in a row. So like by the 3rd time she won't dash, so you have to jump cancel anyway by the 3rd dash to be the most optimal with her. So that's the thing with that. If you don't do that, it's not a huge DPS loss, but just so you know, if you ever wonder why you're dash cancel with her and one time she just doesn't dash cancel for some reason, that's why, right? So that's Hu Tao right there, right? And then we got Yelan. Now, Hu Tao's my favorite character, but Yelan is number 2, right? And Yelan came, I didn't even think I was gonna like her as much as I do, but I love Yelan. One of the things is, to me, like right now, if with everything equal, I do put Yelan at the top in terms of priority. If it was me and I had no account, and if I'm trying to figure out who I want to get, Yelan is definitely a priority. taking away all bias, even though Hu Tao's my favorite character, taking away all bias, she's the one. She's incredibly flexible. She fits on so many different teams, Dendro teams, Vape teams. I mean, you could put her on Freeze teams if you want to. She just fits in so many different situations. You could put her with your Raiden or Electro teams, things like that. If you want to do Hyper Bloom, if you want to do Electro Charge, if you want to do all different types of things. She's incredibly useful, incredibly flexible. Now, there's been the whole situation where do you need Yelan if you have Xingqiu? Honestly, I don't care how well built your Xingqiu is. In my opinion, I do think Yelan is still worth it. Why? One, you can put Yelan and Xingqiu together. You can have them on different teams. And I personally think that Yelan is just a better offensive option in terms of between the two, right? She does do more damage. She's capable of doing more damage. She scales off HP, so she doesn't need Bennett or all these other attack buffs to reach her maximal potential in terms of the damage she puts out. She is very low investment. She doesn't need high investment. A Fav bow is good enough for her. Right now I have her signature weapon, but I mean, her LG event does perfectly fine with her. It actually does better in most situations with that LG because, you know, she's able to, you know, boost the attack and the elemental mastery of the team. And a lot of the Dendro teams, you're going to want that more anyway than her personal damage being higher. So I personally think that she's better than Xingqiu in that sense because Xingqiu does offer better defensive capabilities, a little bit more hydro application. But like in a lot of teams, if you have a healer or a shielder, you know, the extra defensive capabilities that Xingqiu gives, it's not always a big deal. Sometimes it can be, but, you know, especially if you're struggling, you're taking a lot of damage, you're not well at dodging, so on and so forth, then yeah, his defensive capabilities can be good for you personally. But overall, I feel that if you've been playing the game for a while, you become good at the game, you know, his defensive capabilities matter much less, and Yelan kind of just exceeds, especially with that passive that she has where she's able to buff the active character. Come on. I think that she's the number one pick out of all these banners. That's my personal opinion. I do believe that she has more pros than the other characters when it comes to that, right? If I were to really order the characters of priority, I'd say Yelan is at the top, right? All things equal, of course, because everybody's accounts are different. I'd say Yelan is at the top, then I'd put Hu Tao next to that, then I'd say Alhaitham, and then I'd put Zhao at the bottom. I'm not saying that Zhao's bad or anything like that. You know, if you want to blame on the fact that, you know, I'm not a Zhao fan, you can go ahead and do that. But that is what I truly believe to be the quote-unquote smartest decision, right? But as I said in previous videos, where I kind of try to hammer it in, guys, you get who you want, right? If I say Yelan is the number one pick, but you're like, I really like Alhaitham, get Alhaitham. It's not a stupid decision. You know, I'm talking about the smart decision, but none of these decisions are bad decisions. Because in terms of DPSs, like, it really, honestly, it really comes down to preference. Yeah, Hu Tao can do more damage than Zhao can do, or Alhaitham might be able to do. But like if you are a Zhao fan and you have Zhao, you understand that he can do a lot more damage than necessary in order to be all the content in the game, right? Alhaitham is going to be just the same. He's going to be able to dish, if you invest in him, he's going to be able to dish out enough damage for you to be able to beat everything in the game, right? So in terms of choosing between DPSs, I think that no matter who you choose, are all the limited characters that are DPSs, you're gonna be okay, right? As long as you have the 4 stars, as long as you have the supports to go with them, then, you know, you can make them work. But that's another reason why I put Yelan at the top, because Yelan is one of those characters who's not a main DPS but a sub DPS, and she helps support these characters like Hu Tao. Some people use her to buff Zhao too. People are going to be using her with Alhaitham. She's going to be able to help all these DPS characters I'm talking about here, right? So I think she has the most usefulness. So if you had to choose one, I would choose her. But, you know, as I say, you know, like, let's say you really want a DPS. I mean, now you have your sub DPS, but you don't have a DPS for her to help, you know? So that's what it comes down to, right? So that's the thing when it comes to that. That's my ranking of who I think is going to be top priority. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's up to you. All I can do is try to point you in the right direction. All right, but let me know what you guys think. Is there anything that you think that I missed? Is there any 2 cents that you want to throw in there? Definitely let me know. It's always open for discussion. Let me know who you guys plan on picking, who you guys plan on pulling for. I'm curious to see, how many people are going for different characters. Who's the most popular one? So let me know in the comments down below. And also, if you like my content, if you like videos like this, definitely subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. It's helping me out. As I said before, I'm on the road to 1,000. I'm trying to, get more and more subscribers to, so I can get more videos out there for you, and YouTube's algorithm can give me a little bit more love. All right. So yeah, with that, I'll end it there. Legend out.